saw the
what
games,
physical basketball
and I was at the games.
versus
You were
physical
not.
fouling.
You watched it on YouTube.
Anyway,
I saw the games. I watched the
Well, we're here. I'm Bob Moats. Welcome to X's and Joe's, a podcast dedicated to decoding the winning formula in college basketball.
And I'm Mike Wiemuth. Welcome you to episode 31, Portal Madness. Can we actually make any sense of how the portal works in basketball? Recorded on the evening of Thursday, May 8th, 2025. So, Bob, I guess before we get into the regular scheduled programming, I think we need to recognize, a major milestone for our little team here. Not long ago, one of us crossed the Rubicon into AARP eligibility, and it wasn't me.
Bring on the discounts, baby. That's what I'm saying. That 5% on those rentals and hotel rooms, that's gonna come in handy. I'm stoked for stoked for now going into the second part of middle age. Although I'm beginning to feel like 50 is the new 30. You look around at our generation, and I mean, these people are still rock climbing, which I don't do.
Yeah.
These people are still jogging, which I don't do.
Yeah.
But
people your age do those things, so it kind of rubs off somehow.
I could go back and do them. That's just it. I could go back and do them, and so yeah. Thank you. It was a good time had by all, and it's just Mike, you know this because I send you this every year at your birthday, right around Bennett's. When I put the Grim Reaper on the hobby horse, and congratulations, you cheated death another year.
Like within our extended friend community, that is like your staple of a birthday greetings every year for at least a decade, if not more.
I mean, a mutual friend of ours, put that out on. We were at a Damon's. Remember, so those of you of a certain age in Bloomington remember, and even throughout Indiana, knew that Damon's, the place for ribs. They had a Damon's in Bloomington for a little while by the convention center. I think you may have actually been with us. Come to think of it, so we were there watching football. They had like 7 big screens, and they had at that point whatever the Sunday package was.
Yeah, and
Damon's one of those restaurants where with your birthday, these people would come out and just start clapping, and the staff. And I never thought about this because, isn't it always cute when these? And our friend looks at us, and it's our friend that almost got us to a fight in the Purdue game and some other things.
Yeah,
the one, and he just kind of looked at the ridiculousness of it.
Yeah,
looked at us, and then he stood up and started cheering when they were done and said, "Woohoo, way to go. You cheated death another year."
Yeah.
And I thought that may be the coolest birthday. I mean, I think I actually fell on my club chair on the floor laughing so hard because it was just so over the top, obnoxious, and so hilarious. And I realized that's a really kind of a great birthday greeting.
Yeah. We know John. We know John is really big on birthdays, so he's
really big on birthdays.
Which is why I, in the past, there were times I would try to go over the top to wish him the extra special birthday, which is, I think, at the end of July. So,
some year we just sent a mariachi band to his house, just to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So
I feel bad. I still owe you a gift next time we're together. So, I mean, I was kind of thinking of grabbing you some like age appropriate gift cards, but but much to my dismay, I discovered that there is no MCL cafeteria in Columbus, Indiana.
Well, we're at the age now where we can drive. We drive for a Sunday meal with the 2-year-old at the MCL cafeteria.
Yeah.
And we do have an IHOP. I mean, I do see. I mean, they have a nice senior discount and a toddler discount.
Is the Bob Evans still there in Columbus?
It is still there. I don't think I've eaten there in about 5 years. I've not eaten there since we've had the kid.
Okay, well, that all the more reason to do it.
All the more reason to give it a shot because that's the thing.
Yeah.
So,
but either way, happy birthday and hope you have.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, thank you. So, moving along, we joke a lot on the show whenever there's a coaching change about and really the coaching search with the white smoke, black smoke, and I guess it happened for real.
Yeah,
just earlier today.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to say, you have a bit of a connection now to the Holy Father. You guys have a piece. You guys have a shared experience.
Yeah.
You have a common piece of paper that you both earned.
Well, no. I'm a Temple grad. He's a Villanova.
Oh, you're Temple. I thought, why did I think
I'm technically rival, but I worked. So when I was working at Sovereign Bank Corporation for years, I was right on the corner of Lancaster Avenue and sort of the cross street there. I was within about 3 to 4 minutes walk from the Villanova basketball arena, the Pavilion, and right on the corner of the Villanova campus. So yeah, I've been steeped in that community for quite a while.
You definitely have walked on the same sidewalks as he has, as I think we both have because we've been to Chicago enough times.
Yeah.
But Pope Leo XIV, who I think his first act might be to try to get a sainthood for Raleigh Massimino.
That's the first thing I would do if I were.
I mean, you talk about 2 verified miracles. I can point to about 6 of them during the 1985 national championship run.
Yeah.
I mean, Ed Pinckney MVP alone should be enough for a canonization. But I mean, but it's just one of those things where, it's I know that up there. I mean, like, has Villanova shut down campus for the day?
I was this close. I mean, I drive around. I mean, I'm just down the road from there, so it's not not too much of a hike. I was seriously thinking just veering off a little bit just to see if there's any celebrations. But yeah, I'm sure they're deep in their mimosas down at the White Dog Cafe tonight, down there on the main line. So, but I feel bad. I mean, obviously, as much as the celebration is on Lancaster Avenue, I cannot imagine what's going on City Line Avenue with the poor St. Joe's Hawks fans, because I mean, for the last 2 decades, they'd have to basically reside in the shadows of Jay Wright's program and all the national championships and all the media attention. Now added on top of this, now you have a pontiff that has now been that now will be lorded over them by the fans along the main line for the Wildcats. So it's almost like I mean, I think if you're a St. Joe's fans, it's like you watching Warren Buffett win a scratch off jackpot right in front of you just before you were about to buy that same ticket. It's like,
oh man,
it's like, oh, my luck just keeps going. Like national
can't go any worse.
Popes. I mean, we just got everything at Villanova.
Then your wife calls you and says, "I left you for the fool boy." I mean, it's just that's the sort of thing that you're just the worst day ever.
Well, they say the hawk will never die, but you
get,
they're not feeling like they might want to.
There may be the avian flu in his future, is what you're telling me. It's like, oh man, So anyway, that kind of news hit today, and. The conclave is always a lot like it's kind of the most it's one of those things that's steeped in ritual, steeped in tradition.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, how is this going to segue into talking about Little Five?
Exactly. To all of our Jesuit and Augustinian friends out there,
we apologize in advance for the transition or after the fact. The pageantry.
Yeah.
No, it was it was really cool. At one point, I was looking at a buddy of mine who lives out in Boulder, and they were watching. Galen and his student team did an amazing job of putting it up on YouTube. I actually was watching it over here on the tube.
Yeah,
I could get to YouTube on the big tube, and I'm watching the race. I think probably the first time since I was actually sitting there freezing to death at a Little Five.
Yeah.
Because when we were there, it was always cold on Little Five weekend. It was always
that way.
30.
Yeah, it was always overcast and dreary.
10-mile-an-hour headwind going down the front stretch. I mean, it was like, we're doing this is April in Indiana. And the 2 days before, it was 75 degrees and gorgeous. And, then the front would blow through. But, did a phenomenal job with that. And, it's always a special time of year in Bloomington. Graduation is tomorrow. I'm sorry, Saturday.
Wow. It's already come up on us, hasn't it? Wow.
Yeah, they just finished up finals week or whatever that looks like anymore.
Yeah.
So I'm sure upstairs right now is just packed and brimming and spilling over the top.
Yeah, and not just students. I'm sure faculty too.
Oh, I'm sure there is a lot of there. The faculty is definitely packing it in. Yeah. Hope you're having a good morning, man.
Yeah.
But no, that is so it's that time. But every time you think of Little Five, we think of obviously one of maybe the second greatest sports movie set in Indiana.
Yeah. Thinking of
I'm not thinking of Rudy.
Not of Rudy. Yeah, thinking of Breaking Away. Yeah.
Breaking Away.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw this. It's funny, they were doing some remembrances of Breaking Away like on Twitter recently. So that's that's always nice that people kind of like get acquainted with that fine movie from 1979.
It's funny because I do remember those years. I think we both probably do, the Breaking Away years in Bloomington, at least that early part of it. Some of our first childhood memories being on campus. And I'll never forget when the dad's eating the Noble Romans pizza in the dashboard of his car. It always just brings me back to old movies being shown in the Noble Romans, old silent films of the Three Stooges. And you watch them make the pizza, and like when you're 5 years old, it's like, man, that's an awesome job. Then you actually do it yourself, and you're like, I can't get the dough out of my fingernails.
Yeah.
But but I know it's just such a subtle thing, just watching that dad, sitting in the used car and then driving to see his kid in the what's the Arboretum.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's funny, like seeing the library right there. That's the thing that really kind of sticks out. Like, oh, that's where they stuck it.
Ken Gross Lewis said years ago, he was for those of you who don't know, Ken Gross Lewis was a longtime chancellor of the Bloomington campus and vice president of academic affairs. And he was one of the true, I think he became university chancellor after Herman B. Wells passed away.
Yeah.
But Ken would always tell the freshmen every year that the Arboretum, when they tore the stadium down, they were actually talking about maybe making it into a parking lot. And, which sounds like something you do about 2 hours north of Bloomington. That would be the calculus there.
Sounds like a Joni Mitchell song, "Nightmare Come to Life."
It would definitely be, yes, yeah. There would be a big yellow taxi leading the way on that puppy. But so you had the old stadium there. You had Kirkwood and kind of its 70s splendor.
Yeah.
You had the city in its kind of splendor. It's like just pictures of campus. I mean, it's a movie that actually had Herman B. Wells in it. He wasn't even played by Oliver Platt. So, you had that going for us.
It's funny. Like we watched that movie obviously with our own eyes and our own experience, and it's, one of the things I found interesting about that movie that's kind of connected to something like local here. Do you remember sort of like the continuity errors that obviously no one else could tell if you've never been to IU or Bloomington, but obviously just really stands out if you're an ex student or alumni. Like, remember when was it the female object of attraction, was it Katerina or whatever? She drops her notebook and Dave like picks it up and tries to chase her on his bike while she's on a moped. And the route they take is like hilarious because it's like she's going across the backside of the Union heading towards like where the sample gates would be. And then suddenly it shows like 5 seconds later going the exact opposite direction. Right. It's hilarious. Like, of course, like everyone else was like, oh, that's like really neat. And then of course, Indiana people are like, no. Impossible. It reminds me of locally here, the movie Rocky, specifically Rocky 2. Now, obviously people remember the inspiring, the running scene where he runs up, the art museum steps, but the actual if you actually look at the route that he takes, if you're a Philly person, it is absolutely ridiculous. He's running basically about a 40-mile hike from one part of the Northeast Philly all the way down to South Philly, back up. He goes like to the old city and back into the middle city, back to old city again, and then up to the Rocky steps. It's about like, I think someone actually measured, it was like 40 miles, and he's running the whole way, which is like not just like a long-term like long distance pace. He's like sprinting, and then he sprints at the very end up the steps. I was like,
with every child in Philadelphia that was there at that time. Every kid living in the metropolitan Philadelphia area was running with him.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, like Eliud Kipchoge, I mean, he would probably like, probably be like huffing and puffing after about like 20 miles at that pace that he was going.
Yeah, you'd think.
Yeah. Wait, Bob, do you remember, I mean, the last thing we'll talk about with the Breaking Away, do you remember the short-lived TV show Breaking Away?
So YouTube is great with this stuff. And actually, I will probably put in some show notes there. Actually, there's a guy that did some filming locations, including the quarries that he's been he went around. So I'll make sure I dig that up and put it in there. But yeah, I do remember that they tried it. It was back in that time when MASH hit it big.
Yeah.
Oh, we can do this as a sitcom. So there was like Delta House.
Yeah, that's right. There was Delta House.
Same idea where it's like, oh wait, we can make a family-friendly Delta House where there's no fraternity,
right.
And a coming of age story. Well, okay, so kind of like how do you continue this? I'm not sure, but I do remember that because I think I had the mom in it.
Yeah, Barbara Barry was in it, and I think Jackie Earle Haley was in there, and he was Moocher in the original movie too. But the best part was, and I'm sure I'm not the first person to notice this. Do you remember who played the dad?
I've heard it, but I can't recall it.
It's Vincent Gardenia.
Oh, geez.
Now, just a little bit. Now, you remember the dad in the movie? What was his big hangup?
Well, I think it was the Italians, and Vincent Gardenia.
He was born in Vincenzo Sconamiglio in Napoli.
I was thinking it's almost like, are you going to get who's the guy that played Clemenza in The Godfather? Because he was always looking for work at that time.
Yeah, it's like maybe he was busy. That's why
he was busy. He could have taken it's down to those two. Yeah, his issue was the Italians. Hey, let's cast an Italian dude in this.
literally at that time. Vincent Gardenia would have been possibly the most Italian actor in all the Screen Actors Guild, and they had him do that role.
Oh man,
it shows it does show what a good actor he was.
Yeah, pulled it off.
Meetings like, wait, you want me to wait? This is his big hang up.
Yeah. Why not?
You want to say this?
It's a living.
And the best part, he didn't. You could really tell, like he did not try to hide or overcompensate for his like accent. So it still kind of sounded like, I won't say like full moonstruck Vincent Gardenia, but he definitely did not sound like a guy born in Monroe County, Indiana.
Yeah, and worked in the limestone quarries.
Yeah.
Well, so congratulations to all to everyone who made Little Five once again one of the greatest, the greatest college weekend.
Yep.
And speaking of that as well, last time we were on with Galen doing the thing, a couple weeks ago, he was sporting a Little Five line from our title sponsor, Home Field Apparel.
Yeah. Yeah, they've got some very like month of May focused theme rollouts recently, and I think you had noticed the Ed Carpenter racing line that had come out.
So not only can you get, if you're a fan of Arrow McLaren, or if you're a fan of hometown legend and driver Ed Carpenter, there's a whole Ed Carpenter racing line that's out that you can check out on Home Field Apparel. In addition to the wonderful vintage college gear and some other gear as well at homefieldapparel.com. But I also would like to note that if you go ahead and sign in for email, get on their email list, because today I think I saw like they have a limited line of some IU stuff that they're actually offering to alums with 30% off. Yeah. So if you're so check your email, for those of you who have personal email and you're tired of getting spammed. That's actually solicitation email that you want. It's from Home Field Apparel, because when they're putting, it has some of the jackets that we talk about on, and some of the really cool stuff that they have that that they're looking to get in your hands and get it on your body through the spring, and then onward from there.
Yeah, I do love, because like last year they also had some, great vintage stuff and, kind of sort of like Heroes of May sort of like seems to be the theme. I've always been looking forward to the idea maybe they could come out at least once with like the villains of May with like a Kevin Kogan line would be awesome if they would ever do that.
Kevin Kogan or
like
Coogan
with a car where like all the cars are going forward and one is just veering like.
Oh man! Speaking of disasters, it's Coogan. That was like AJ Foyt. Foyt.
And Mario Andretti.
Oh, I know, but
Mario
Foyt walking down. I think it was walking down pit row, and whoever it was. Oh, geez, wasn't Jack Arute at the time, but it was. He's getting interviewed and it's like, well, what happened? Coogan and Mario with the greatest line ever. They have children doing a man's job. It's like people think like they got on Tyrese Halliburton for what he did after doing the thing up in Cleveland, which is incredibly great, very intelligent trolling. Yeah. But you look at kind of the press conferences or the conversations with athletes in the heat of the moment in the 70s, 80s. You think they were obnoxious now? Oh man.
Just going to some of those AJ Foyt ones whenever he like crashed out would always the fascinating viewing.
Wide World of Sports ratings go up when AJ hits the wall or AJ's car, or usually AJ didn't really hit the wall. When AJ's car would do something like it would just pop open and there he was like with his wrench working it out. But the Kevin Kogan Villains of May line. Yeah. We've got that one going.
That's my suggestion, but I'm sure it will not see the light of day. But just throw it out there.
I always felt kind of bad for me. I think something on that car broke, so it is what it is.
Yeah.
All right.
Check out that and all the rest of the great retro gear at homefieldapparel.com. And so coming up in segment 1, we'll examine the madness. How are teams using the transfer portal both successfully and not so successfully? Next on X's and Joe's.
And welcome back to X's and Joe's. As I was kind of thinking about the portal, I was trying to think of a good movie reference. And since we're kind of trying to figure out just what's going on, why not try to figure this out? We were talking on somebody call last night, and it's like, do we know anything? It's like it's really kind of hard right now to even ascertain what's actually happening in the portal,
right?
Because it's this massive like flood of programs, all just doing all sorts of wacky stuff. And then you have like guys coming in, like I think Magnus Pelkowski's now in the portal because he thinks he may have another year of eligibility. Yeah. I mean, it's like it's like watching It's a Mad World.
Yeah,
I mean
that's a good. I haven't thought of that movie in a long time.
Oh, I mean, it's like the whole thing where it's like you have all these legends of comedy, including the Three Stooges. Second, by the way, X's and Joe's first 2 Three Stooges references in the same episode. Or at all.
Record.
That's a record. I mean, it's a new track record.
Bob, the summer's coming up, and that just means that our basketball content tends to recede, and the pop culture and old timey movies references just skyrocket. So
right,
really don't apologize for it.
I won't apologize. Okay, so anyway, so it's this whole thing. The premise of the movie. Basically, everyone's looking for a buried treasure, and they've got a police officer on their tail. And it's Spencer Tracy.
Spencer Tracy was the cop, right?
Was a cop, yes. He was a detective who may have been like 5 years old.
Who else was in that? Like, it was Buddy Ebsen. It was
Buddy Hackett. Buddy Hackett, not Buddy Hackett. Buddy Ebsen was the Beverly Hillbillies. Buddy Hackett was
Buddy Hackett was in that.
Like Sid Caesar. It had it had at that time literally everybody. And then the cameos were great. I think Jack Benny had a cameo in it.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
I think Bob.
My dad was a big Jack Benny fan. We watched Jack Benny all the time.
Yeah, and actually, So you had basically, it was a bunch of running gags from the 40s, 50s, and 60s that just played out on the big screen in a 2-hour movie. Yeah. But the whole premise is basically everyone's just like trying to crawl all over each other, and then the whole thing crashes at the end, and they all end up in the hospital.
Yeah.
arrested.
That's right.
So it was like the jail ward of the hospital.
Yeah.
So I think the backtrack to this is just it's kind of this whole just zaniness that the portal has become.
Mm-hmm.
And what are they, everyone knows what they're trying to do in the portal, but how are they trying to accomplish this, especially with Florida, who kind of threw the weird ethos pitch by winning a national title with nobody in the top 100 RCPSI or whatever that one is.
RSCI,
yeah, that one that's on College Reference or sport on the college basketball sportsreference.com, right? The one that has the college basketball, not basketball reference, but has the pros.
Yeah.
And so you're watching, you're kind of seeing this, and you're seeing they built this thing. A lot of the players were mid and low major type players. A lot of these players were also. But they all had specifics. The skill sets were pretty amazing. And again, we saw Clayton Williams close out something. This was a guy that was playing mid-low major basketball 2 years earlier.
Yeah,
and he closes out for the shot to knock the last shot off.
Yeah,
and then you kind of look at Auburn and kind of their mixture of recruits, but also with some guys like Johnny Broom, who was sitting at Murray State. A couple of years ago.
Right.
So all of a sudden, some things have kind of changed, at least from how these rosters are being built. And that's something we're definitely going to get into over the summer, because we are kind of trying to still figure out, this is just the tip of the iceberg, the very tippy top of the iceberg.
Right.
But I guess the question, one of the things that we kind of noticed was that there are some teams that have definitely turned themselves upside down.
Mm-hmm.
Or some teams that have definitely kind of put themselves in a position. And do we have Torvik up? Do we have that yet?
I don't have Torvik up. Do you want me to pull it up?
If you wouldn't mind pulling that up, then we can take a look at Torvik. Okay, so we like to use KenPom sometimes here because KenPom has a really, really, really good just individual player and team stat thing, and kind of can look at different percentages. The rankings do matter to a certain degree, but at the same time, it's also just a good database for statistics. BartTorvik.com is another one that we like to look at. He has different algorithms with different measurements. He actually does have a BPM that's a little different than the sportsreference.com one that we usually use. But Torvik, when we have them up, he basically has already put out 2026 rosters. And you're going to see initially, if you're watching this on YouTube, you're going to see this initially. You're going to see a disclaimer that says, don't really pay attention to the rankings yet. Right now, I think I use 38th out of the 300 plus teams. And we're going to talk about Indiana later. But if you go to let's say, you can actually type in like Iowa, you can go to Iowa. Like if you looking at a team that's definitely turning itself upside down, Iowa would be one of those programs that is definitely going to look a lot different. And in part, Fran McCaffrey is now Mike's neighbor in Philadelphia.
Yeah. I can't wait to see him.
I mean, and you can definitely will be at the Palestra, holding court or storming court would be probably a better way to look at it. But with Iowa, Fran always played very much an up-tempo form of basketball, very heavy on he's going to outscore you. Defensive metrics were always lousy. Never really looked great at Iowa. The defense basically fueled the offense.
Yeah.
And then they bring in Ben McCollum, back to Mike's theory of opposites.
Yeah.
They bring in this new system.
Opposite of at least the pace of what Fran liked to play. So,
well, and even the style of play too. Fran with ball press concepts. He always wanted to make sure he had a guy that was about. I think the Murrays, for example, were great examples of this, or Sanford as well, where you'd actually have a guy that would sit at the head of a 1-2-2 press.
Yeah, and
that could either trap, or he could contain the ball, or could drop back into taking away a passing lane. They had all these different looks out of that 1-2-2. They could go man out of it. They could go zone out of it, 3-2 zone.
Yeah.
With that middle being this very highly skilled athletic guy. There was always a big post what they would actually utilize for, sometimes in the post, but a lot of sometimes just off of cuts and dump offs, those types of things. And they always had great shooters. You're still going to have great shooting at Iowa, but like, what are we seeing with them, Mike? I mean, as you kind of look at this, because it looks like, and a lot of it looks like Ben McCollum's brought his Drake team, a lot of the elements from his Drake team over from. First off, it was his D2 gig.
I think he brought 5 players from Drake.
And a couple of them were with him at D2, right?
Yes, I believe at least 2 of them were with him before. I mean, the 2 that stand out, well, I mean, at least the 2 total players, I think, that stand out that all fans should kind of keep an eye on, that are going to be like real, I think, they're going to be kind of the headliners, I think, for Iowa, is Bennett Sturtz, who was kind of the golden boy for Drake in this last run through the NCAA tournament. I mean, he was, I believe he was player of the year in the conference. Leading scorer, just kind of an all-around badass for Drake. And I definitely think his game will be very interesting to watch going into the Big Ten. The other one, maybe the one that's lesser known, but I think it's going to be just as interesting, is Alvaro Fulgaris from Robert Morris. He was the Horizon Player of the Year. It's kind of like a taller, kind of a bit of a Euro big. He's not like 6'10". He's more like 6'7", 6'8". But man, he's really good. I mean, I watched him a good deal this last year. He's just he's one of those players you would typically see kind of within the realm of draftability that can basically just play everywhere. Can score, pass. He basically just has guard skills as a big, and I could definitely see why McCollum went after him pretty hard, because he's going to be a very interesting guy to pair with Sturtz going into next year.
Before I talk about Cooper Cock, who's back as well, and he was on Iowa's roster last year, got injured, but just a brief moment on is it Fulgaris?
Fulgaris. I think it's pronounced Fulgaris.
Fulgaris.
Yeah.
Alvaro Fulgaris.
Yeah.
One thing to kind of keep in mind with this kid, he shot, so his BPM was 8.3. Sturtz was 10. And at Drake. But one thing to kind of really keep in mind here is he shot 41.7% from 3 with 180 attempts. But his 2-point percentage was 60%, 123, hit 123 out of 204 shots.
Yeah.
And that was at Robert Morris. And I mean, that was definitely like that's the sort of shooting that when you're shooting at that big of a clip, even if you take a bit of a productivity dip, I don't see you going from 42% to 25%.
Right. Yeah. Typically, like, percentages don't undergo that big of a change. So sometimes they do a little bit, but it's guys that can hit shots typically.
Yeah. And so Cooper, it's Cock, right? Cooper Cook, who was there.
It's Koch. It's like,
Koch.
remember J.R. Koch?
Yeah. I remember everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and again, he played in, I think, 10 games last year. He was kind of I thought he was a pretty big recruit for Iowa, in many respects. It was more towards the top end of Iowa's recruiting than the bottom end.
Yeah.
So he's another player kind of keep an eye on at that 6'8" area, where, he's definitely a front-facing player. He's definitely more of a driving, that more sort of modern 4 big. Probably a good comp to Trent Sisley or a Tucker DeVries would be my guess.
Yeah, it's kind of in that. Yeah, definitely kind of that zone.
So remember with McCollum, they were under 60 possessions this year on average. With their tempo on very defensive minded. They're highly efficient. So a lot of us listened to a lot of Ben McCollum stuff when we were in our coaching search, thinking McCollum might consider Indiana, or Indiana might consider McCollum. His 1 year, he won a great deal at, I believe it was Northwest Missouri as a as their head coach in Division II, and then moved over to Drake for 1 season, replacing Darren DeVries. Yeah. So there's going to be some interesting dichotomy with DeVries and McCollum. This is almost a natural, what you would call, comparison between the two, I think.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, just because of their having had the same stop on their resume, there's always going to be just the natural inclination to compare them.
And again, you're going to see a lot of ball screens. You're going to see a lot of really solid defensive intensity where they're going to slow their opponents down on offense, and then they're actually going to maybe not run as much transition as other teams because they're not trying to allow the other team to run on a transition. So if Fran McCaffrey would just say, "We're going to outscore you," I can, we can, he's going to out efficient. He's going to be more efficient.
Yeah, and I think the question will be, and what everyone was talking about when McCollum was under consideration is what speed is he going to play at? Because obviously the thing that stood out was just how slow he played, or at least just the limiting the number of possessions in total within the game. I think he was literally at the bottom of all D1.
Yeah, he was like
when
363. Yeah.
Yeah, he was literally like 363 out of 363. And of course, the question was like, okay, well, once he gets, Big Ten Power 5 level athletes and players, will he speed up? And so that's going to be kind of the interesting question is like, I could see him definitely, like, I don't assume he's just going to stay like way towards the bottom. I'm just not sure like how much faster he intends to play.
Right. And again, he's been very successful being highly efficient. Very similar to kind of like you see the tempo for let's say you would see that same tempo like a slower tempo for like Dan Hurley would be a good example of that.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that would be kind of a similar type of approach to it. Yeah. Moving on real quick. So Illinois, I know you've actually Illinois is amusing to both of us, I think.
Geopolitically.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it appears that Illinois is basically becoming the Serbian junior national team in real time. They've definitely brought in a ton of talent in terms of kids from I guess at least vaguely from the former Balkans area. The one I really want to highlight is Andrei Stojakovic, which is Peja Stojakovic's son. And I actually drafted this kid in my little some of the my friends from Terre, they were doing a college basketball I guess it's like rotisserie league, and so we actually did like a draft, and I actually took Stojakovic on my team because I definitely see a lot of potential in the kid, and yeah, he's probably going to be like maybe a late second round player, maybe going into next year. But he's really good. I mean, what makes him a little bit different, I think, is a little bit more scary than maybe some of the other really talented kids that Illinois had this last year. Is that Stojakovic is going to be a junior. He's and he's already basically kind of up to speed in terms of his development. Whereas some of the really talented freshmen that Illinois had last year, or are still just freshmen, and so they're more potential than they are actually output. So it's that I think that's going to be interesting to watch Stojakovic operating within the offense. At the same time, the two Ivisic brothers will be playing. Both tall, 6'10" plus. Both can hit shots from the outside. I think Tomislav is probably going to be a first round pick next year.
Okay.
And so his brother, who's coming in from Arkansas, who was at Kentucky, will be joining him. I don't know if he's quite up to speed as Tomislav is, but yeah, Illinois is going to be very interesting to watch. They're literally going to be looking like like I said, like a junior national team from overseas with a lot of the players they've got. And they still have like Kylan Boswell will be coming back, and they got a pretty decent recruit in Brandon Lee, shooting guard, who's like a top 100 kid. But yeah, they're just going to be a very unusual team to watch in terms of like just the pure skill sets that they're going to bring to the table.
Well, and Ben Humentris from Illinois, who's from Evansville, who actually I think he started at NAIA, didn't he?
I believe so.
and so or D, yeah. So he started. So he's also back as well. Decent numbers. Boswell didn't shoot the ball nearly as well as at Illinois as he did at Arizona, but when you surround them with more shooters, and I think you're gonna see a lot more of those Euro actions out of, I really think that you're gonna see a lot of flexibility with them really kind of looking to get many of these guys downhill. And when you start thinking about the Vizix the brothers, when you start thinking about Stojakovic, you start thinking about these guys, they have the ability to run some different types of inversions, some different types of just stuff out of two-man game with a lot of just, and you can definitely know that they're going to read the floor incredibly well. So you're going to have some decent, and really good shooting around them too. So I think a lot of this is, you see almost a turnaround in Illinois, where I think for years they were trying to get that SEC type roster.
Right.
Now they're trying to get that, get that Sarajevo roster.
I think Underwood's inside out strategy is start in Belgrade and work your way out.
Work your way out. Yeah, exactly. Kind of like the Austrian Hungarians did in 1914.
Exactly.
We're gonna kind of go this route, but I'd also kind of just throw out this as a possibility with Illinois. Just as time goes on with this, it is something that if you're one of those teams that, again, much like Arizona's done, Gonzaga's been fairly successful at this, looking at that international game and bringing guys over, especially in the era of player compensation.
Right.
The calculus there would have been, well, I'm just going to do the Tony Kukoc and play in the Euro Leagues for a while. The Euro League's always going to be there, but if you can make high six figures, low seven in the United States of America for a year or two, play against a lot of future NBA players, learn the American style of play a little more.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a good place to have that. So there's definitely Illinois. We're going to quickly just go and look at Louisville, who is, I wouldn't say that they're completely putting themselves fully changing, but I would say that grabbing Isaac McNeely, especially grabbing Ryan Conwell, especially, one of their problems with making, honestly, they're
really well.
So seeing them live last year and watching what Creighton was able to do with them by basically keeping it in, I think it was Hepburn's hands and somebody else, one of their other players' hands last year. There was a lot of what you would call, it was just a lot of stagnation in that offense, because they didn't have as many shot makers and they really weren't as adept at hitting at the perimeter, especially against a team like Creighton, who is. Yeah. So when they fell down, they couldn't get out of the hole. I think now they have a team that can maybe help them get out of that hole a little more. And Ryan Conwell, who's probably one of the best examples of why the portal's a good thing for players. I'm going to put him up here real quick and just taking a look at where he's played.
Yeah, it's his long journey towards the top.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Conwell's BPM has never really been great, but I always feel like he definitely punches above his weight.
Yeah. Well, his overall offensive output is, what his calling card. So
pretty impressive. I mean, you're talking a 40% 3-point shooter with over 200 attempts, almost that 250 range. Yeah. But the other thing is he's a major difference maker. And so you put him, take him out of Xavier, put him into that ACC style roster at Louisville. And you look at the size here, you have a lot of guys who are going to drive the ball and shoot the ball.
Yeah. Well, I think that, McNeely is also like a top 30 shooter in the country. I mean, his numbers are kind of, ever since he came into Charlottesville, he's been one of the most elite shooters. I mean, remember in high school, remember IU was going after him pretty hard.
Yeah.
And that was the selling point on him is man, this kid is one of the best, possibly the best high school shooter in the country. What's interesting about them, obviously you could put them opposite each other. Yes. And you have Mikael Brown is coming in. He's probably the fifth, sixth best high school recruit in the country. Definitely going to be an NBA player very soon. And also Adrian Woolley from Kennesaw State. He's a freshman guard that came in, and he's just totally blown up. He's already on draft boards already. late second round for 2026. So yeah, so you got a good combination of shooters and also some like really upper tier scoring athletes that are primary ball handlers that can really sort of balance out the roster in terms of the ability to attack, but also the ability to hit shots from distance.
And remember, a lot of what that does for you, and especially when you have a couple guys who are in that 6'10", 6'11" range that can kind of do that, kind of be effective in two-man game, rolling to the basket, popping out, ghosting or slipping screens, whatever. A lot of it's just putting pressure on help side defenses to bring tags over. Are you going to tag off of McNeely? Are you going to tag off of Conwell?
Yeah.
You could.
Yeah, that's the question. Yeah, I mean, it's the question, right?
And if you do get downhill and that tag has to then veer more into a little bit more help, then you get a guy who can deliver the pass. Yeah. And McNeely, we just saw, looking at his assist rate, he learned to be a much better passer under Tony Bennett. Yeah. So, again, you're going to see Pat Kelsey go, again, he'll be more adept at doing what he likes to do, which is get the ball in, get it to an open shot, and it's they're not going to be pumping it down inside like Purvis Ellison's down there again with Denny Crum at the helm.
Yeah, last year, I mean, obviously they had Chucky Hepburn, so there was a lot of like focus on keeping the ball in his hands, and like you said, they didn't quite have the kind of shooters, so there was definitely a focus on getting Chucky kind of like in the lane and kind of like feeding the bigs and things like that. So,
and if you were able to do to them what Creighton was able to do, which is basically just frustrate Hepburn to no end.
Right.
And force him to take basically C-D type shots. If you think about it as letter grades, A shots to F shots. Yeah. And for Chucky Hepburn, a C shot's better than some guys' B shots. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
But when you're also playing Creighton with their high-octane offense, it really, it was fairly apparent fairly quickly that by the end of that first half, when they were dug into a hole, it was really hard for them to get out of. And that's, I think, when we talk about this next group of teams real quick, so like what they're trying to do, teams like Louisville, I think Louisville is trying to level up a little bit. But I think the more obvious one for me as to leveling up is St. John's. And we'll go to them real fast because I think the biggest problem with St. John, first off, you have at in Jamaica Gardens, you have a guy in Rick Pitino, and you look kind of at what they did this year with a good team. They had they really were able to get the 2 seed out of the big out of the Big East.
Yeah,
won a lot of games. They out athleticized, but were more athletic than their opponents in so many ways. And they forced a lot of turnovers. They controlled the boards well. They did all the things you're really supposed to do. The one area they were lacking was shot making.
Right.
They were a high transition team, but when you go to, like you said, you go into a synergy and you start looking at where their efficiencies were in like half court types of offensive, they get a lot of shots. They'd stop their opponents from hitting shots.
Yeah.
But when you ran up against, let's say, Calipari at Arkansas in a tournament game, who could match you person for person athletically, it was very hard. St. John's couldn't. Yeah, they could compete, but they couldn't get to where they needed to be offensively in order to basically legitimize themselves as a top 2% team.
Yeah. Yeah. If you look at the guys they have that Pitino added, I mean, he basically added what you could probably easily project as at least an Elite 8 level starting lineup just from the portal. I mean, Jackson from Carolina, I mean, he's probably going to be maybe like a late second round NBA dude. Jason Sannon from Arizona State, I mean, he's also probably will get drafted. Bryce Hopkins from Providence.
Right.
There's some other interesting, I mean, obviously they still have, I think Zuby still has 1 year of eligibility left. And, he's one of the best players in the Big East. And then, I mean, their fourth or fifth, like guys brought like Dylan Darling out of Idaho State. I mean, he was the Big Sky Player of the Year. So, and he was, again, a player that IU and some other, big schools were looking at. So, I mean, it's amazing that, Pitino could just within the matter of like, a few weeks, just like assemble this good of a portal haul in such a short period of time.
And unlike last year's team, where again he was looking at, it was almost like I would describe it to Oklahoma Kelvin Sampson type teams.
Yeah,
where you had amazing athleticism, amazing length. They could defend, and they could, and especially running Rick Pitino's style of defense converting into offense, getting into transition, where lets you play with a lot of freedom on the offensive end. Because as long as you defend hard, we can play the tempo we want to play. And if we can play the tempo we want to play, then we can definitely put our opponents in a position where they're not going to be able to score on us effectively. We're going to pressure not just the ball, but really passing lanes. I mean, it's unlike a Samson where you see a lot more trapping, where if there it's just a matter of just relentless pressure on the basketball, a lot of one-on-one, and then the lanes are very much packed out where teams are very uncomfortable and can't get their timing down. So they're going to make you shoot the ball poorly. It's no small part to mask how they're shooting, so because they shoot the ball so poorly.
Yeah, they lost R.J. Luis, which was kind of a loss for them.
Huge,
obviously, like you said, from
big loss for them.
I think overall they probably got enough offensive output in the portal to help make up for that and more.
But Luis was high volume, but he was very low efficiency. And that's, I think, one thing to keep in mind about some of this. When we're talking about these types of teams, like St. John's is leveling up. Also, you're looking at a program that did it with, again, more that mid-major, not, the high major guys. They went out and got some high major guys that were being underutilized in the programs they were in.
Yeah.
So that helps.
Yeah. Another guy that I'll mention, and I think you heard me talk about this guy before. Remember when Darren DeVries got hired by IU, or West Virginia had like 2 or 3 like really good recruits that were sort of on the table at possibly coming over. The one I liked probably the most out of all of them was Kevin Odie. Like top 75 swing forward, and you perfectly describe the way you describe Pitino's I guess let's write the composition of the team. Odie is like a perfect swing forward for that. That kid is just an unbelievable athlete. 6'7", has got at least probably a +4, +5 wingspan on that frame. And just completely gets up in the air. It's just like an absolute menace on defense. And he was one guy I really would have liked to have seen if I had a chance to pull him in, because he was really special. But seeing him go into St. John's, I think that makes a lot of sense given what Pitino wants to do.
And that's what's good for us as IU fans. And we're going to talk with them in kind of our next segment here in a few minutes. One thing, he landed him to go to West Virginia. I think when we start watching, we're already kind of watching DeVries in the portal, or I'm sorry, in the traditional recruiting sense now. I have a sneaking suspicion those are the types of players he's going to be going for to bring to Indiana.
Right. Yeah. But beyond year one, that's always the the admonition about year one versus year 2, 3, and 4.
So moved on to Kentucky real quick, because again, similar to St. John's, I think Kentucky did it last year with kind of a strange, with a hodgepodge of different, and even some power, a little more Power 5 than let's say what IU's brought in this year. But I think they've definitely kicked up some things a little bit, especially if Otega Owe comes back, that's going to be huge for them, obviously.
Right.
Yeah, they let the Perry kid go. Perry's gone. That in-state kid.
That's this is interesting. That's like
Damon Bailey.
If Damon Bailey left, you went to the portal,
right? And again, they're really carrying some holes, covering some of these guys that they had last year. When you think about their ability to and I think Malachi Marino could be an interesting player for them. Because he looks like what you would call a college center would be today. Yeah, can stretch the floor. He's front facing, mobile. But I mean, you look at where they were last year with Amari Williams was a prime example where he was had a 25% assist rate. Yeah, he was kind of the SEC's version of Danny Wolf. Yeah. So you look at that.
Yeah, the interesting thing about what Pope is doing, I kind of like it. He's bringing in some really good portal kids that are sophomores. Yeah, or at least they're sophomores. I think to be juniors, but they're going to have at least 2 years left. Like Jalen Lowe from Pittsburgh. Yeah, great guard. 16 points a game as a sophomore in the ACC, and I think that kid's going to be a gamer. And I totally understand why Pope push for him and maybe let Kirk Carissa go out the back door at the same time, because I think that's definitely an upgrade. And obviously, like they got Jaden Quinance from Arizona State, and he's a freshman phenom. He's probably be a lotto pick in the next year's draft. At center. So, and they got I think they got Diabate from Alabama. I mean, he's a bench kid, but he's still sophomore, great athlete. So I think Pope did a pretty good job, I think, of maybe upgrading at a position or two of need for to maybe kind of elevate them a little bit closer towards like an Elite Eight, Final Four-ish kind of roster.
I've got Diabate up here just to kind of show this at 6'7", and something I wanted to mention about Mark Pope last year. They did a lot off of when you kind of look at how teams were scoring and how they were penetrating the ball. They have decent dribble penetration, but it's not elite by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah.
I think but where they got a lot of what you call penetration, or basically getting to the rim, they did a lot of it off of cuts and actual cuts from the perimeter inside. So when you're Mark Pope and you have a lot of that, you have a lot of guys that can, basically you have a roster full of guys that can shoot the basketball from the perimeter. Yeah. One way you stop that is you pressure those passing lanes, and you also kind of pressure and you try to just you try to just prevent the ball from getting there.
Yeah.
Well, if you can't drive it as effectively, that makes that drop coverage effective. That makes ice coverage more effective. So how you counter that if the help side is further out, because they know that you may not be able to be as effective at getting you to stop you from going to the lane, to the rim, you back cut it.
Yeah.
And Pope entered in so much back cutting and so much, 45 cutting, that it really just helped defenses to have to come off their man a little more into help side, not just to cover what the ball handler was going to do, but really what the perimeter players are going to do in attacking the lane through cuts.
Mm-hmm.
So you get a team, you get a guy like Diabate, you look at the kids shooting 65% from two. That's 6'7". He's got, and that's in a Nate Oates offense. So there are layups and dunks.
Right.
So,
yeah.
So real quick, I just want to say a real quick word about UNC, and they're kind of on the way, because this doorway works both ways. And I'm going to say, because we could obviously talk about every team in the country if we really want to. We really don't know enough to say anything yet on that. But if you look at Carolina and the Elliott, the kid in the Cadeau, from who
Cadeau,
transfers out. Cadeau transfers out.
Waiting for Cadeau.
Waiting for Cadeau. And they're obviously replacing RJ Davis.
And there was Jalen Withers and Ian Jackson, obviously we just mentioned before, and I think Jalen Washington, the kid from Indiana, I think he went to Vandy. So
okay, I knew Jalen Washington. He was at Gary area.
Yeah,
and so this is so it's kind of a thing.
They got gutted pretty good.
Yeah. And sometimes, I think it was Buddy Hackett in the plane. Sometimes the plane just kind of, it's the pilot had the medical episode, and you're doing loop-de-loops, and that's North Carolina right now.
Yeah,
with Hubert clearly on the hot seat, because that, not to bring up anything, we're not going to bring it up. We promised we weren't going to do it, but there's a conversation happening in Chapel Hill that sounds vaguely familiar.
Yeah, they brought in some decent players, like Stevenson from Bama's pretty good. Young from Vautech. I mean, Powell from West Virginia. They got like two pretty good recruits, like Caleb Wilson and Isaiah Dennis. So they'll have some players. It's just that none of them really stand out. I mean, a lot of the guys they did kind of bring in for the portal were 9-10 points a game, decent contributors, starters, at other Power 5 schools, but nothing that kind of makes you think like, oh yeah, this is a Carolina roster. And you're right. I mean, it's kind of scary about the upside examples like we provided with like St. John's being able to go out and just put together such an elite starting lineup like that fast. You can also lose a pretty good starting lineup just as fast going out the door. I mean, as much as we talk about like Carolina, Baylor might actually be worse.
Right.
Baylor, like if you take out like, I mean, they obviously lost like, I mean, they have guys who are leaving anyway, just because of like, graduation, everything like, no Chad Omier, Jaden Dunn, Jeremy Roach, I think also lost his eligibility. VJ Edgecombe, is going to the NBA, but they lost like everyone else who was still like, left over. I mean, they lost Rob Wright to BYU, which just kind of killed him. They thought he was going to kind of be the leader of the team this coming year. So it's, so you're right. It's just, it can really swing very fast in either direction in terms of like building up the roster, but also having the roster completely collapse on you.
And you can argue Scott Drew, and I'm going to scroll up on this just to show you what he basically said about the rankings of these teams. It basically says don't too early to use this. And I would agree that it's really too early to use it, but it gives us a general idea that the roster looks on paper to be good enough to be 14. So it looks like a top 5% roster.
Right.
That doesn't necessarily mean, in fact, if you go down, going up, going down, it's one of those deals where if you're especially a coach on a hot seat, if your team's perceived to underperform, you're in a tough spot. And that's, I think, that's where the danger and the trap is for North Carolina, is that you can get really kind of like you were saying, Mike, they got some guys.
Yeah.
But is it going to be the same types of impact guys that they need to maintain that top 5% or to get back into that top 5% after this past season where they just didn't get there?
Yeah. Here's a question, Bob, and kind of just take a step back. So you're a fan, let's say at Carolina or in Waco for Baylor, and you see your team get go through this kind of like mass departure without, let's say, a sufficient replacement of reasonably comparable talent. Like, who do you blame in that example in the modern sort of configuration of college basketball? Because in the past, it's all on the coach. The coach is absolutely responsible for everything. Now you have, well, I mean, if you don't have a good NIL program to compete, then okay, is that really the coach's fault, or is that something that is like a little deeper and endemic within the program? If you have a GM position, and maybe your GM is not like the Howie Roseman of college basketball GMs, and you can't just outwit everybody within the open market. So that's maybe that could be an episode maybe down the road we could think about. But I was just thinking of that thinking of that in the context of schools that are like big schools that have really great reputations. You'd think they'd have good resources, and they just go through this huge drop off, and you think about, okay, well, how do fans and the media react now to that? Like, what does the conversation look like in terms of the responsibility for these things?
Both programs, a couple things to just briefly hit on this. Duke's not having a problem. Carolina is.
Yeah.
Duke did just fine. Duke's going to do just fine again. And it wasn't just because Boozer went there. His kids went there.
Right.
I mean, that's it. There's only so much loyalty in the world. But Baylor, you have Hubert Davis, who's replacing a Naismith Hall of Famer.
Right.
Who was too separated from another Naismith Hall of Famer.
Right.
So you kind of go down this list of, you are blue blood. You are definitely, at this point, if your money manager's running you into the ground, if Uncle Billy's running you into the ground, you send Uncle Billy to the sanitarium, and you find a new Uncle Billy. Yeah. So that's, I think, where Carolina is. Baylor, because it's Scott Drew, they will name something after him, either the floor or the court. Have they done it already? I don't know. But he's brought the dudes in to compete. And again, you're looking at one sitting in that top 5%, the other one's in that next 10.
Yeah.
Kind of in those 30s, which he could level up. But I think a lot of those come down to the conferences. This is what the ACC and the Big 12 look like, and why teams in those conferences are going, I don't know how we're financially going to compete.
Right.
Baylor and NC both have strong alumni donor bases, but when you compare that to TV money, and especially at Baylor, when you compare it to football, it's going to be really hard for them to continue to compete.
Totally. Yep.
I wanted to just talk about Purdue briefly before we get out here, because there's some that's definitely a replace some pieces roster.
Yeah.
And that's why I put them up. But with Purdue, they didn't lose much. I don't know. Cam Heide to me was a surprise. Cam Heide was a surprise.
Well, yeah, I mean, so Heide and Colvin were, obviously the most prominent departures. I mean, they lost Berg, but I think that was
Berg was academic. I think
was definitely going to be pushed out.
And Colvin was academic insofar as it was a culture fit more than anything else. I mean, there was a line. Didn't Painter say earlier in the season there was something he said in a press conference of, "Yeah, he went in the game. I don't know who told him to do that."
That was hilarious. It's like, yeah, he just.
You thought.
It's like, wait a minute, where's he going?
Why all of a sudden is Purdue asking out asking for moving boxes the next day? It's like maybe this guy's not
the joy of legacies.
But
the funny thing, Bob, and that this was something as this was going on. So like Heide and Colvin departed, I think, within a few days of each other.
They did.
And my thought at the time was that, okay, well, what is Painter looking to do? I thought he was going to try to really address maybe what is the most, let's say, prominent issue that Purdue has faced sometimes when they get, in the tournament against certain kind of teams, and just kind of overall been the problem keeping maybe Purdue from even getting higher than where they've been. And that is basically just like athleticism at the wing positions, getting guys at the 2, the 3, maybe like the stretch 4 that are really that sort of upper tier athlete attacker that can, the kind of players that they find themselves like struggling with against, let's say, like in UConn in the championship game.
Right.
I thought they were going in that direction. And instead, I think they actually went even further the opposite direction. They went for guys that are even a little bit.
I put him up.
More lumbering at the big position and even more skilled, possibly at the guard and off wing position, but not more athletic, possibly less athletic than Heide and Colvin.
Right. And that's where I put Oscar Clough up here real quick, because it's kind of like that's who got the replacement. And again, he's a 5th-year player. I don't know if he was a JUCO before. Just something for you guys to kind of look at if you want to research a little bit on your own. Heck, throw it in our comments on YouTube.
Yeah, he's a dude. Yeah, that's a man.
That's a man playing a boys game. And but you still have Trey Copperman. You still have Daniel Jacobson coming off of injury. You're bringing in Antoine West. Jack Benter's coming to campus. Raleigh Burgess, as you're seeing up there as well. And I do think that they're putting a lot on Cox and Harris. I really think that Painter's going to put a lot on Cox and Harris to develop. And so you have kind of, I would say, it's going to look like a lot of teams that you see that are very successful. And again, everyone's got them in that top 2%, very top of college basketball right now because of Braden Smith's incredible production. Fletcher Lawyer can still shoot the ball. Trey Copperman's still very effective scoring the basketball inside, as kind of added to his game a little. He's not when we were talking about him as a recruit for IU, he never turned into that 3 that was rumored to have been the selling point.
Yeah.
He's not turned into that sort of tall wing with driving ability who can shoot the 3 ball with amazing acumen. He's definitely a college center, but you kind of look at this roster and and again, they were very successful last year. You can assume they're going to remain with some success, but you're going to see probably, the Smith, Lawyer, Cox, Harris guys and maybe some Antoine West there at the 1 through 3 spots. And it's a question of how the bigs play out with Burgess, Jacobson, Clough, and Kaufman-Renn. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm curious what an 8-man rotation. I think I just gave you a 9-man rotation at Purdue, but I'm really curious how that looks.
Well, I'm very interested in seeing what Omer Mayer is going to be like. I mean,
we forgot about Omer Mayer. He's not even on here.
He may be possibly the most interesting player that Purdue is bringing in. I mean, I could totally see why he would go to Purdue, because he sees Braden Smith and he definitely has in Israel, like he is like
Right.
he is the Braden Smith of of Israel in terms of basically his like style of play, and if you watch his like tape, it's like the kid shoots, kid uses screens incredibly well, just like very savvy. Not a great athlete overall, not doesn't have like a huge like frame, but just knows how to work the game, and and does it basically at like a pro level. So yeah, that kid is going to be fascinating to watch.
Very, very much so. So when we come back, we're going to talk about how IU can definitely beat Purdue this year.
It's
it's going to be interesting. So we're going to kind of go in a little deeper into IU's roster. We're going to kind of talk about the moves Darren DeVries made, how we think they're going to play together, and kind of looking a little bit at the schedule just to kind of get get a better idea of what we can expect as IU fans going into the summer and beyond.
Welcome back to X's and Joe's. I'm Mike Wiemuth, joined by Coach Bob Moats. So, Robert, the roster, it's finally seeming to have come to an end in terms of its design. So, your thoughts about what this thing looks like?
I mean, I'll start with the solidification. Actually, I'm going to start at I'm just going to take off the table quickly talking about Luke Goody and Anthony Leal with not knowing. I think at this point, you can definitely see, and they're not up on the roster cast for Torvik. But if they come back, you're looking at two guys that are going to be culture pieces, fit pieces. I said last night on assembly call, I'll say it again. I do think Luke Goody stands a better chance in this system of significant playing time. I could see Leal maybe getting it, but it's like I'm also not utterly convinced that all this that Leal especially is going to get that waiver. I don't even know how the process works, but I can see why they're going for it. I definitely see why Goody's going for it. I definitely see why Leal's going for it. But looking at the roster as a whole, even with the two of them in there, you're looking at a lot of experienced players, and I know there's been some speculation that low major, mid major type players, high level, low major, mid major like players, also on teams that weren't exactly tournament teams coming out of there. They weren't exactly at the top of their conferences. How does that translate to the Big Ten? Mm-hmm. I think that I would start with this to begin with. Paul Ferguson, the varsity coach at Columbus North, has a great saying that I love to steal, which is great shooting absolves you of many basketball sins.
Right.
You have a team that you can put, you're going to have 5 guys out on the floor. You look at the 10 guys on this projected contributor list, and you have 9 of these 10 guys who are pretty solid, definitely in that 35-ish% or above range of hitting 3-point shots.
Right.
So now what we were talking about earlier with Louisville, where you can stretch a defense, where the whole idea, or with Kentucky when we talked about, you're going to force that help line to maybe move a little closer to prevent the shooters. Yeah. And then you throw a kid like Tatum Connerway into play, who can definitely get downhill, definitely attack a big and drop coverage, can definitely get around icing, especially with Big Ten guards. Because the other thing is not knowing really what the Big Ten brought in a whole lot, but we're not exactly seeing that same level of athleticism that the SEC has in the Big Ten. What you have in this roster is you have a bunch of you have kids that are that if they can that they can counter defense as well just on matchups without even going into scheme necessarily.
Right. Yeah, the shooting obviously kind of stands out. I mean, we've talked about that at length. We've already done our homage to Lamar Wilkerson, or at least I have, in terms of my admiration for his shooting capacity.
If you ever want to see Mike Wiemuth giddy, go a couple episodes back on the assembly call and see what Mike looks giddy. Giddy is a schoolboy on Christmas morning with the Sky Strikers under the tree. That was Mike a couple weeks ago.
Absolutely. And yeah, it's what makes it really interesting is not just like him, but and you said it accurately. Having guys that are at least decent shooters makes a big difference. because we always tend to think about shooting in the context of, oh well, we need a shooter, as if like there's just one guy you need that is going to hit like 45% and just get him the shots all the time, as if it's like 1987 and it's Steve Alfer running off of like 30 off ball screens with a 45-second shot clock.
Figure eight. Yeah.
They go in and out. Yeah. So some of the good teams that really shoot well and effectively, not just in terms of like, the point production you get from those shots, but also just how they spread the floor and open up passing lanes and driving lanes. A lot of those teams have guys that will shoot not necessarily in the 40s. Those have many guys that shoot like 35, 36, 37%. And sometimes that's enough. Now, if you actually do have some elite shooters like Wilkerson is, like Tucker DeVries is, like guys that are legit, like, 42 plus on decent volume, then that really stretches the defense extra wide. And you can really do a lot of things in terms of, like there are so many different schemes and sets that you can run when you have the other team spread out versus when it's basically just packing the lane, like we've seen far too often IU's opponents undertake the last 8 years.
The thing I want to kind of go with that also is that I looked at synergy at some of these players and what they did at their schools past, and a lot of them were taking ball screens. They were the ones who were being screened for. So remember in the game, and we can look at them as you look in. Let's say you go on a Torvik and you start clicking the players, look at their assist rates. They're all great passers. So a lot of them are great passers too. So DeVries clearly said, I don't want guys who can get their own shot. I want guys who can create their own play and make the right reads.
Yeah.
And don't be deceived by some turnover rates, because sometimes you would see passes that, let's say, a Nick Dorn was throwing. I was hitting there big in the hands and hit him in the face, sort of thing. That sort of thing that, when you put them with better players, if you put a bunch of all conference low major kids together, thinking like a Drake, where you take a high level winning Division II program and you stick them in the Valley, can it be successful?
Right.
I think it can be. I think especially with what we're talking about, but when you have these guys who have been taking the ball screens and they're kind of expected to carry a large load of the scoring and the shot and really the shooting, where their C and D shots are better than some of their teammates' as A or B shots or even A shots.
Yeah.
Now you can actually start pushing these guys to be more efficient.
Yeah.
Tayton Conaway doesn't have to force a 3-up. He has options, better options than he had. Tucker DeVries is more the exception to the rule because he's played on some really, really good teams, including that West Virginia team last year before he got injured.
Yeah.
But a guy like Lamar Wilkerson, who still has a very high offensive rating, even though his team wasn't exactly a big winning type team, but you look at that sort of assist to turnover, you look at some of this stuff. This is a guy that can definitely get his own shot, but also can make some plays. But I guess what I'm trying to say here is he doesn't have to shoot the ball as much as he was shooting at. He doesn't. He'll probably still have a 25% usage rate at IU, but not everybody's going to have a 25% usage rate at IU.
Yeah.
And he has some teammates he can trust, and he may not have to do this every game where he's got to be the guy that he'll be performing every game, but he's going to have some more help scoring, not just with Tucker DeVries, but some of these other guys he has on this team.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the interesting things about when you look at the metrics of really good mid-major players moving up to Power 5. And you see there's not always a lot of slippage. Sometimes they actually improve.
Right.
Which kind of goes against conventional wisdom.
Lance Jones.
Right. Yeah. Or I think Damask, going to Illinois, his numbers popped up too. And so that kind of defies, sort of at least the inherent logic that some people think when it's like, well, when you move up, your productivity goes down. Well, when you move up, yes, you're facing greater athletes. But the good thing is, like, two things stand out. one, yeah, you're going against better athletes, but you're also having better athletes on your team. And two, you're probably no longer the center of attention for the opposing team's defensive scouting. They're not double teaming you now.
Right.
Where if you are an elite level player or like an upper tier number one option at whether it's, you're a Davidson or Elon or Drexel or Sam Houston State, you're at those schools. Yeah, every night the opposing team is putting two guys on you, or they're shading very heavily in your direction. Now you go to Power 5 school, you have many good players around you. You're going to have a little bit more space to operate in many cases, even though you are facing better athletes that can close out just a little faster maybe than before. And that does make a lot of difference. And it does seem to indicate why you see so many good mid-major kids going into the Power 5 level and still producing as well, in some cases better than they did at their lower school.
And exactly. And that's, I think, and now, programs and teams are going to have to, again, guard everybody on the court. You're going to see, I think, more level 3 type reads, by the way. You're going to see more hit the lane, kick it out. You may still see a lot of long twos. Like when you look at some of these guys, many of them are pull-ups. My biggest concern, I'd say, I'll say it again, is finishing at the rim. Yeah. I mean, what it's lacking is it's lacking above the rim play.
Yeah,
I think that it comes. It's just not going to be this year, which I think does kind of limit your ceiling a little. But I put up on the Discord. And by the way, if you haven't if you're not doing the Back Home Network Discord or kind of doing into the Substack, for I think it's like $5 a month, you can join the community and kind of see some of this stuff and continue the conversations. But part of the conversation that we were having, some people were having earlier today, I kind of threw this out, was Kentucky. They won 2/3 of their games. They were 10-8 in the SEC. They still eked out a 3 seed because they had some big wins early against some high ranked opponents, some highly ranked or high metric opponents. But a lot of it is this is a team that could do something very similarly just based on its makeup. And I think that DeVries was very interesting at West Virginia, that as the team got injured, he started, again, more actions, more sets. He ran some incredible stuff at Drake that we're going to break down for you sometime over the summer. I'm going to kind of sketch some stuff out for you to look at. But you look at, as we look at these, at this team, like you can run inversion with Tucker DeVries and Connor Enright, or Tucker DeVries and Lamar Wilkerson.
Yeah.
If you could run Wilkerson off of inversion, and just set that up where he could pop, he could even ghost that screen that's going to create the space for a guy like DeVries who can deliver the basketball to him. And then all of a sudden the entire defense is sucked onto those two guys.
Yeah.
Think of what we complained about when Romeo Langford was here, that they never put Romeo Langford and Juwan Morgan in a 2-man game.
Right.
You can set them out. You can also put them together on the same side. And then the whole defense is sucking over to this. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, now you have Nick Dorn sitting out on the perimeter, who, when they get the ball to him off of that one more pass, he's wide open for a 3-point shot.
Yeah,
and he will, and he hits it definitely above a median rate. Yeah. So, those are the types of plays you have. I think we've talked a little about how they're going to play together. Like who's going to, is a question. Who's going to start? Who knows? But I think one thing that I was interested in early on was looking at co-leads with Conaway and Enright. You look at those top 5. Wilkerson can definitely play that sort of perimeter wing type player.
Yeah.
Put DeVries at the theoretical, what I call the perimeter big, or what people traditionally call the 4. Yeah. Reed Bailey will be your 5. Yeah. And you're looking at kind of the minutes. I don't think it's going to be 76 and 8 with Bailey and Alexis. I can see it more of a 65-35 sort of situation, because I think they're going to need Alexis to take some poundings.
Yeah.
But this is a group that, at that point you're definitely playing 5 out, and you're going to have a lot off cutting, a lot off driving. I think because you're going to have 4 guys who can drive, and you're going to be playing Big Ten teams that aren't necessarily what you call fleet of foot.
Yeah. Yeah. We were talking about this earlier, and I know you had put, or at least penciled in Enright as a possible starter, and I think I had put in like I had more like a slightly bigger, I guess, configuration. I had Connerway, Wilkerson, Dorn, then DeVries, and then Bailey. But I think you're right. I think there's going to be. I doubt there's going to be like one fixed like 1984 Boston Celtics, like lineup where it's like okay, Johnson, Ainge, Bird, McHale, Parrish every night. So yeah, there probably will be some variation, and yeah, I think Enright is going to be very interesting. And yeah, I did just tune in just in time on AC last night, and Coach Tonsoni's homily to Mr. Enright. That was interesting.
And I was ready to go through that computer screen, run up to Delphi, and I just run through a wall for the guy. I mean, I was ready to go. I'm like, yeah.
I thought Coach was going to need a wardrobe change there after that. After that one,
I needed one. What are you talking about? I mean, I was like, wow, I love it.
No, but he was right. But he was right.
He was right.
There are a lot of things you can do with Enright that maybe people are possibly overlooking in considering other let's say starting lineup configurations.
Saw a thing on YouTube briefly, and again, look for great basketball resources. Unless you're coaching your kid's team, go to YouTube, look for drills, look for trying to train your kid, look for ideas. And one of them was, it was one of those little story clips, and it's like coaches don't care how you get to the lane; they need you to get to the lane. Mm-hmm. So a guy like Connerway, who just has full downhold speed, with just full downhill speed that can just blow by guys, and he has blow by speed. Would you agree with that, Mike? That Connerway is a blow by type guy.
In the film I've watched him, yeah, I think there are certain guys that
one-on-one. We're talking one-on-one coverage, or he gets a ball screen is what I'm going with.
Well, yeah, he's not Tom Coverdale. Like that's the drivers like Tom Coverdale that basically just like they know they can't get by you. So they just stick their butt right into your rib cage and just ride you to the cup. And he's not a stop-start guy, like many guards are now, where it's basically like I can't get by them, but I will get him going, stop, change direction, get lateral waggle, and and lay up the other direction. So, but yeah, I think he tries to basically anticipate lane opportunities. Let me put it that way.
So Enright, I think, is more than that and that other mold, where I think he's more of a shifty type of guard that gets to the lane.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't have great speed, but think a control pitcher who changes speeds well. That's how I see Connor Enright when I watch him play. What he has available to him.
Yeah, and Connerway's a little faster, obviously, and he's just overall Connerway's probably one of the better athletes on the team overall in terms of his configuration of skills. I would say, and I think we talked about this before, I think Connerway is probably, he may not be the best player on the team overall. He possibly could be if you take his defensive metrics into consideration. I think he's the most important player. Like his defense and his ability to pressure the ball is so important to this roster, given some of the, let's say, the deficiencies you might have with, let's say,
above the rim play,
like rim protection.
Yeah,
where that I think he's going to make up for a lot of, let's say, deficiencies you might typically see on other rosters, but because of the way DeVries sort of like positions his defense, he really does put focus on just harass the ball as much as possible, not just in terms of the person with the ball, but the person receiving the ball. It's one thing his son is actually really good at. Tucker DeVries is not a shot blocker, but he is great at anticipating passes and stealing them. That's why he has like a 4+ defensive box plus minus just on the defensive side of the ledger. So yeah, I would say that one thing to watch this coming year is Connerway staying healthy, Connerway playing a lot of minutes, Connerway doing a lot of harassment, hopefully continuing to be one of the best in terms of steal rate of the country. I think it was like third this last year. So it's a great idea for Coach DeVries to bring him in at the one position, given a lot of the players you have at the 2, 3, 4, and 5 are really good with certain offensive capabilities, but are not necessarily have the same balance in terms of their defensive capabilities.
We can actually see a team that can definitely be better at really running ice ball screen coverage.
Right.
They definitely take that middle away, force to reject into a guy like and to Reed Bailey, who's still fairly mobile for a guy who's 6'11",
Yeah.
or also even a Sam Alexis, who's pretty mobile for a guy who's 6'8".
Yeah.
And you can definitely also see them potentially trapping some stuff out of ball screens. He did that at West Virginia sometimes, where he could just vary ball screen coverages. It's not just going to be we're just going to drop down and try to force him into rim protection. We're going to keep him out of the lane.
Yeah.
One of the areas of you teach early in basketball is help and recover, and the whole idea is recover. So when the ball is dead, the whole idea is you get back and you just get into that passing lane. I think that's one thing that they're good at doing. One, because of the way they position themselves inside, it's not really a pack line, but the way they kind of take away the lane,
Mm-hmm.
they're able to kind of limit the angles in which a ball handler can attack. That's what DeVries has done at both of his other head coaching positions at Drake and West Virginia. Yeah. And then when they pick the ball up, and what you can say basically is funneling down to past the blocks, your blocks extended, you're funneling down to that baseline. Yeah. There's really nowhere for them to go with the pass. And if they try to force something, then you have, like you were saying with DeVries, opportunistic steals, which gets you in transition.
Yeah. If you're an IU fan, I think one bit of video,
it's going to look a lot different. It's going to be different.
Totally. Yeah, it's going to be very different, which is, again, going back to the theory of opposites was kind of the point. You don't want to do the same thing that has been transpiring at the program for the last 4, if not 8 years. One bit of video I would recommend IU fans, and of course we'll probably post it in the show notes, is watch some of the games, and I think there's most, if not like full game coverage, but at least like, extended highlights of West Virginia last year at the Bahamas tournament.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Against Gonzaga, especially. Watch some of the highlights against Gonzaga, and you see exactly what DeVries is trying to do on defense, especially. I mean, offense, we've already talked about kind of, what they try to do in terms of constantly using ball screens and constantly, having, if not having Tucker DeVries, like, just like cause mayhem in terms of drawing defenders to stop him from taking shots, but also specifically freeing up other guys off of those actions to get to open shots. But look at what happens on the defensive end against Gonzaga. You could tell that there was a lot of intentionality to get steals, to get stops, in terms of like basically goading the Zags into very specific passes, into very specific spots, with the intent of basically like stealing the ball or trapping them, which is great. And it's something I think that is going to be interesting for IU fans to break down. And obviously, we'll enjoy watching Tony's videos. I'm sure he'll be doing
definitely
and watching AC post-game highlights. I'm sure you and Coach Tonsoni will kind of go over that stuff too. But it's going to be very different, and I think it's going to be unique just from a coaching standpoint. And one thing, we look at, Peaks.com and Inside the Hall, and of course there are these debates about like, oh, what's this team going to look like? How many wins are they going to have? And I would say that, owing to some of the conversations we had before on this podcast, remember, like in year one, the wins don't matter quite as much as the film. What you're trying to do as a program is try to create the best film package for recruits in year one. And what that means is like you're trying to have as interesting an offense as possible. You're trying to make sure that your guards and wings have as much productivity as possible. Because I can tell you, like, with a good deal of certainty, that was something that did not take place in some prior regimes at IU. If you want to know, like, why did Archie Miller's recruiting just crumble, around like year two, especially when it comes to guards and wings? It was because the film was out on them.
And I would
go ahead.
I'd add this to that, because when you had other people who were parents in the program at the time publicly saying on the social medias, I remember seeing a couple times out there on the out there and whatever the kids are using this day, Ticagram or those damn kids in their Snapdragon
or whatever.
They're SnapX, and they're doing all the hoochie coochie dance with all the stuff and the reason the things. Yeah. But the family, we have family members going, well, yeah, they really didn't use Romeo Langford all that well.
Yeah.
Your kids in the program, stop talking about it. That sort of approach to it, which is, when it's coming from inside your family, it's never really a good sign.
Right.
And I agree, Mike. You're right that. I said it last night. I'll say it again. Look for good shots. See if they're getting the shots that you see those top 2% teams. Just look and see if they're getting those shots. And even if they don't always go in, they're on the right path, because they're not looking to just cram the ball someplace. They're not looking to just try to overdo, or just trying to run the offense so well that they're just so designed and programmed. I mean, that was, again, we'll go back even Crean at times, Archie definitely, going back the last 20 years, where there were times where IU looked very robotic.
Yeah.
And if it looks more flowing, and if it looks that way, I'll guarantee you that if it passes your eye test, go look at Torvik. You don't have to spend the money on KenPom, but heck, the best $20 you'll spend the year, other than joining the community, obviously, is or home field, it would be going in and spending $20 on for Ken Pomeroy stuff, comparing it to Torvik, seeing what these guys are doing, and if you see it, it's going to definitely reflect on the metrics. And then go back the year before and just compare it. Go back 10 years before and compare it, and see where the program is relative to where it was when Archie Miller took over his first year.
Yeah.
What I will say is I don't anticipate this team getting blown up by 20 points by Indiana State on their home floor the first game.
Yeah, and also in addition to that is just the idea that this is year one, and you're already seeing a variance in terms of what the players are like on the roster now and what they're shooting for in year two in terms of like their high school recruiting. Like
Right.
if you look at some of the offers that are going out right now, like we have Davion Atkins, Jason Gardner Jr., Anthony Thompson, Taylor Kinney. I saw just before we went to air here, Jordan Smith, the guard out of DC, just got an offer. I mean, that kid's probably one of the top 5 or 6 players in 2026. The good thing is that he's from Team Takeover and from Paul VI, where just so happens that IU has a coach that coached at both of ththose places.
Yes, he did.
And that's something, and that's another thing to kind of like look at. And, we didn't really get a chance to talk too much about like the assistant additions, but
let's take a quick break. Let's take a quick break, and then let's go into that real quick. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that in traditional high school recruiting, and then wrap this puppy up.
Okay.
So we'll do that when we come back into X's and Joe's.
Welcome back to X's Joe's. I'm Mike Wiemuth, joined by Coach Bob Moats. So yeah, Bob.
So you were saying,
yeah. Sorry about that. But yeah, we were sort of scurrying into talking about the traditional high school recruiting, and it's interesting that you have 2 assistants that IU has added that are sort of in that. Sort of like the golden crescent of elite college basketball recruiting in terms of high school. And I've put this stat out there before. 85% of starters on national championship teams in the last like 10 years. But frankly, it's, if you could extend it back, 20, it's going to be about the same number. But about 85% of starters on championship teams come from either the I-95 corridor or the I-20 corridor, which basically goes from like the NEPSAC conference region up in Boston, down through New York, DC Metro, down through the Carolinas, get barely into North Florida, you turn right, heading across Georgia, Louisiana, and basically stops in Texas. That L is basically where 85% of championship players come from, which means the whole rest of the country is only producing 15% of the championship rosters. So knowing that, obviously you want to have as much access to those areas as is humanly possible. And the good thing is that IU made some really good hires. I mean, Drew Adams, like, is everyone knows him in terms of his like access to Indiana, and it's absolutely would have been one of my first choices to recruit out of the Midwest. And he also has like, you know, some really good connections overseas. But Kenny Johnson and Coach Clark was just added from Tennessee. Those are exactly the kind of guys you want to have if you're going to take advantage of that particular that L as you're pointing out, because
Kenny Johnson, Clark,
and Clark is interesting because he is in the South, but he's actually a little bit of a Missouri, Kansas guy.
Okay,
by background. I mean, he's from KC, so he has recruited into the South a lot while he's at Tennessee, and also, you know, he's at Austin P as well. So he's kind of like Tennessee. I'd say he's like more of a mid South kind of where his base is. But the good thing is that there's two AAU programs I would say IU fans need to pay particular attention to. One is MoCon out of Overland Park, Kansas, and the other is Team Takeover, which is in DC. Both of the IU assistants I just mentioned coached those two programs, and they have a great deal of experience, connections, and frankly, it's just like, it's almost like part of their family. I mean, like, they are known, like Kenny Johnson and Rod Clark are known within DC, with Takeover and MoCon. And these are not small AU programs. These are some of the best in the country. Like MoCon, I mean, just going down some of the list of the names off the top of my head, like, you know, Trey Young, Michael Porter Jr., Shake Milton, Kenny Chandler, like that's one that Coach brought over from Tennessee. And yeah, just I mean, the big chunk of the championship team at KU a few years ago was MoCon. It was like Abaji and Christian Braun was a MoCon kid.
Okay.
And yeah, and also, you know, you go over Takeover, and, you know, there's plenty of names that we've heard from there before. It was like, you know, Victor Oladipo, Jeremy Grant, Josh Hart, you know, from the Knicks. I mean, just, you know, going down the line, some of the best DC kids have come out of Takeover. So if you're an IU fan thinking about like, okay, what was recruiting going to look like going forward? It may not look exactly like what this roster is right now. I think this is a really good roster in terms of what we've discussed about kind of winning the PR battles in year one that are necessary for, let's say, the building of your chip stack. And what have we talked about extensively prior to DeVries coming on board in terms of like what a coach should be doing at IU? And I think the one thing he's really emphasized that is, I think, going to pay off quite well is getting IU's 3-point shooting back on track. If I had to make it, again, volume is
accuracy.
But accuracy is, I would probably put accuracy slightly above even volume. You don't have to be Alabama. You don't have to chuck like 45 threes a night, but you have to make a pretty decent amount. And that's what's, I think, just driven IU fans up a wall the last few years is the misses, just constantly missing. And while the other team is always gaining like a 9, 12, 15, 18, 21 point advantage just off the 3-point shots.
And I think that's a huge part. Plus, I mean, this is also a roster that gets fouled a lot. It doesn't really commit as many fouls, and now that may change based on the competition upgrade. But I think those are really great points, Mike. And I think when we were talking about assistant coach and coaching hires, the L was a big essential part of the conversation that we were having. Mm-hmm. And when they landed Clark, it's like, okay, that at least gets them where they need to be logistically or geographically. And again, geography plays such a key role here because that's how relationships are built. I mean, it's easier to get a guy to drive 2 hours to your program to see it. And I'm talking not just a kid, I'm talking about coaches. I'm talking about just building that relationship and those relationships that are essential throughout college basketball.
And the families too.
Exactly. And a kid like Trent Sisley remained at IU. They reached out to him. They got him back. He didn't go in. The Zerno kid, the other theoretical recruit that we had, where I thought he was going to be at Villanova. They ended up someplace else. I mean, like Georgetown or
got bounced around somewhere. Yeah.
But I think the thing is, and I think that you look for continuity when you're doing high school recruiting. You're looking for getting a base to work from, and you're working a base of maybe 2 or 3 players still every class. Maybe 1 leaves, 2 stick. I think that would be a ratio that I think coaches would be interested in kind of looking at. Coaches are complaining right now. I think you can you see this throughout the media. We have to recruit our own rosters again, and some of the old guys. And now, just remember, for those our age, Steve Alford's now one of the old guys. Oh, it's just woe is us because now we actually have to change how we do things because of this new dynamic. But I would just kind of add that you still are going to, baseball found this out. You still need a farm system. You also, again, maybe seeing that, I think it was not Robinson, but the kid from Addicts who went over to, could have played, could have sat more on a D1 or a Power 5 team. I think it went to Toledo. Yeah. Maybe spend a year or 2 in the MAC, work your way to where you want to be as a junior and senior. So I think you're going to see, you're going to see that methodology a lot. That sort of elevator or escalator, one goes up, some go down. Some of these guys are going to kind of wash out of Power 5 programs. Other guys are going to stay, or the other guys are going to move out. Power 5 players who decided to get that year or 2 of experience. I do think making your 8-man rotation, especially making into the 8-man rotation as a freshman, or definitely is important for kids who want to stick around. Don't have to be a starter necessarily, not have to be getting starter type minutes, don't have to be at that 65% of minutes type threshold, but they're going to need that experience playing in those programs. Because I think the other thing is you're looking at money. And I think the money is definitely going to follow where it's like, okay, you're going to work your way up. It's going to be kind of a tiered compensation system where I think the older you are, the more you're going to get. I don't think you're going to see, unless you're talking about Cooper Flagg.
Yeah.
That sounds
like a unionization comp program you're mentioning there.
Well, it does, except I think the big difference is definitely, I don't want to say merit, but there's definitely a merit concept where it's like, it's almost like a sales structure, if you think of it more or less, where you get promoted to, you start as a district to a regional to a super regional sales manager, where now you have guys working under you where you're still doing some of your accounts. Yeah. That's kind of how I look at it. More of a, you're going to start off here and show, can you make your bones? Yeah. And then if we have a guy making his bones, let's say a guy's out, selling someplace else, and he's really successful. He's blowing his quotas away. You may jump him into a sales manager role, right, and make him your district manager versus what we're talking about. So, hey, I just flipped that to a capitalistic model, my friend.
Yes, you did. You did that all the while subtly referencing The Godfather at the same time. I noticed making my bones in there somewhere.
You did hear yeah, exactly. You know where I was going. It wasn't accidental. No, I mean, so I think I think that's a great point. Yeah, you were making there, where it's like there's a lot of this that keep an eye on those programs Mike was mentioning, and keep an eye on what IU is doing. You may not hear as much. I'll be honest. You're not going to don't I'm not going to tell you don't get into it. Get into it. But I mean, you're sitting on Peak. You're sitting on inside the hall. You're sitting on Trilly. But you're not. I would say be very cautious. Waiting, like spending every waking moment trying to think, what did the kid commit today?
Yeah.
I don't think you're going to get that same sort of giddiness or collective insanity, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, and I know you guys talked about that on AC last night, and I think it was a good point about just the change in the the channeling of information through the through the IU interwebs in terms of what's discussed and kind of what leaks out about recruits and things like that. So I think that was a very good point that you guys made, and yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how often we're going to have a traditional recruiting sort of drama like we used to have on Peaks, where, I mean, think about how often there's been players that come through, especially like kids from Indiana, where you'll hear a name when they're 14, when they're like ninth grade. Oh man, we're seeing this kid come up. He's already Clark Francis already has him. Clark Francis rated him as the number one, 7-year-old, several years ago, and now he's almost into college. So yeah, and then of course they progress. Oh my God, here's where they're looking at.
Yeah,
it's to be a sophomore. Oh, here's what they're doing at the AAU circuit. And the junior year. Okay, now they're taking visits. You get a senior year. Okay, the big announcement. Where is he announcing at his high school where there's a big crowd? Oh, that must be good for Indiana. Or is he announcing at the local Ponderosa? And that's probably Indiana. Who did that? Was that Brother Zeller did that? Is that right?
I think so. So we're going to wrap this thing up here because you made a Ponderosa reference. So I now
it's time to go.
well, it's. Did I tell you this story yet?
No. What?
So we now okay. We're gonna wrap. We're gonna take this actually well into full circle. Yeah. I'm 50, which means I now have a niece who's graduated college.
Well, that's right.
Congratulations, Caroline, who has some proud Ohio University graduate. I paid my respects to Curtis Rourke while walking by the stadium. I thanked several alums and thanked several students for letting us have him for a season. And Surratt, I think it was Surratt as well. Wasn't he from there? Wasn't Elijah Surratt?
There was another. Yeah, I'm trying to remember which other player was from Ohio, but there was another one, I believe. So.
Another one from OU. So anyway, OU. Oh yeah, I now know what that chant is. So no, we're driving. We had to stop. We had to stop for dinner on the way there. So we went there from Columbus, Indiana, via Columbus, Ohio. So we're going around the outer loop. We end up going on the south side of High Street. And I'm telling you, we found a Skyline chili, which for those of you who are from the Cincinnati area, you know what Skyline is. It's it's a classic, and we like it. So as we're going to Skyline, the left side, I see on the left side of my eye, a Ponderosa.
Wow, there's one out there still in the wild, huh?
There's a Pondo, and it exists.
Yeah.
And I looked, and I did it. I just looked, Bennett. A Ponderosa. There's a Pondo. And he starts going, Pondo, Pondo, Pondo.
Yeah.
He does it all through dinner. He sees the Pondo. Where's the Pondo? Pondo's over there. The waitress comes and goes, oh, yeah, Ponderosa. We have one of the last ones on the planet. Yeah, it's we're talking, my in-laws are there. They were at Purdue. They talked about Sunday nights at the Ponderosa in West Lafayette. That was Sunday dinner. My wife is thinking, I'm going to bury this guy
alive
next to a Buckeye tree.
Yeah.
With his head out, wearing an IU hat just so people can mock him the rest of his short life. So yeah, my son has actually seen. He can now live to tell his children that he actually saw a Ponderosa,
a living Ponderosa,
living, breathing, parking lot full. I might add Ponderosa. I mean, that parking lot was filled. Those people were they were strapping on the feed bag, man.
Congratulations. Yeah, I obviously out here in Philly, we do not get ponderosas, but I'm glad they're still somewhere out there in the wild.
They used to have sizzlers too in your neck of the woods, and those I think there's 2 left in the Panhandle of Florida.
Yeah, exactly.
So, all right. Well, so on that happy note, we want to thanks to Bob Thompson for the music and sound of the show. Special thanks to John Ringer of rigdesign.com for designing the look and logo of the show. And here fairly soon we'll have a new producer. William McDermott has offered to help us out here on the show. He's going to help get us cleaned up, trying to make it sound a little prettier, and kind of have some fun with us here. So thanks to William for joining the X's and Joe's team.
Yeah. Wow, we're growing like we're going mad here. A 50% increase in the
in the group. We're surging in growth.
A massive upgrade. Yes, exactly.
Surging in growth.
We need to put that on a PowerPoint presentation. Well, I mean, look, we've increased by 50% in terms of our.
Look at us.
Yeah.
Also, big thanks to Jared Morris for all the help he's given us in getting this thing started and being a big part. Every time we do this, we upload it, and Jared takes care of us. So thanks to Jared for doing that as well.
Exactly. This wouldn't exist without Jared. So
no, it would not.
Yep. So this endless conversation was brought to you by the Back Home Network. So be sure to check out all the great BHN content, including the Assembly Call, Doing the Work, the Drill Drive, and Crimson Cast on YouTube and backhomenetwork.com. Oh, before we drop out, the next show, episode 32, I think we're going to discuss the mid-major purge. We'll do a deep dive on how the portal and NIL is basically altering the balance of talent between, let's say, the power conferences and the smaller conference schools. And I think we'll try to do a special bit of focus on how it's impacting March Madness, specifically answering the question, why were there no cool upsets in rounds 1 or 2 this year? So we'll take a dive in that and try to maybe as best as we possibly can explain with numbers and charts and all sorts of other fun accoutrement why that did not take place. So look for that probably about 2 weeks time from now.
Implements of destruction.
Exactly. So until then, until next time, I'm Mike Wiemuth.
And I'm Bob Moats.
Take care, everybody.